Ruben Amorim's position at Manchester United is once again under the microscope. The club have insisted he will be given more time, but there are some who think it is already time for a change. Joining me for this debate is ESPN's Rob Dawson and Mark Ogden. They've written a piece on this very subject, which you can read on the ESPN website, but we're going to debate it in person as well. Rob, I will come to you first because it's very, very early in the season, and yet these questions are already being raised. So the question is why?
Well, I mean, the question of whether he should stay or go is probably valid. You know, everyone will have seen the stat of 8 wins in 31 Premier League games. He will admit himself that that's just not good enough for any manager, probably, and particularly for a United manager. You know, we're not talking about a particularly small sample size. He was appointed in November to replace Erik ten Hag. It's not as if he's come in the summer and he's had 4 or 5 games and people are already deciding that, you know, his position should be up for debate. Lots of the stats are damning, you know, including that 8 wins in 31 Premier League games. It's also United's worst start to a Premier League campaign since 92-93, I think. So all of these things combined has led a lot of fans to start debating whether Ruben Amorim is the right man for this job. And you know, as I'm sure we'll discuss going forward in this debate, there are some who have already decided that he's not right and that United should be looking to change.
Yeah, those 8 wins in 31 is not a good look. Mark, it's frankly you can't say it another way. It's a terrible record, and 3 of those wins came against Southampton, Ipswich, and Leicester, the bottom 3 from last season. 1, of course, is against Burnley this season. 36 goals, goal difference of -13. Are you willing to give him any quarter, any allowance for the fact that the end of last season clearly became about the Europa League, not the Premier League?
No, not really. Like you said, you just rattled it off there, Sam, with the teams they've beaten. They've shown no evidence for me of beating teams that Man United should be beating. You know, teams at the top end of the table. They haven't gone close, really. So 8 wins in 31. I saw a table published earlier this week of the 17 teams that have been in the Premier League last season, this season. United are bottom. So that is more than a small sample size. That's basically, you know, they are the worst team in the Premier League that's been there for 12 months. So I just haven't seen any sign of progress under Ruben Amorim. Now, I put my hands up when he was appointed. I thought United had made a really good appointment. I thought they'd got a guy that was the rising star in Europe. We know that he had a great time at Sporting Lisbon. Liverpool were looking at him, Barcelona were looking at him, but those clubs didn't appoint him. They went elsewhere. And one of the reasons Liverpool didn't appoint him was because he was so wedded to his 3-4-3, 3-4-1-2 system that Liverpool couldn't risk spending £200 million on new players that would fit the system who didn't work out. Now, that's exactly what Man United have done, but they've got no kind of fruits for it. There's nothing there that says just a bit more time and it'll turn the situation around. You know, like Ruben Amorim as a guy, is good as a manager in a press conference, he's honest, but you look at that squad, you look at the team, and they're not performing. And I just don't understand why any coach, any top-level coach would have only one way of playing. That, for me, is just, it's a dereliction of duty. He should have more up his sleeve than one plan.
Yeah, Rob, we've mentioned it there. I mean, let's focus in on that system, that formation of it, because it's probably the main stick that is being used to beat Amorim here, apart from the results, obviously. Has his commitment to this shape and some of the comments that he makes around it as well, has it shocked you a bit?
Not really, because I think that United knew exactly what they were getting when he was hired. You know, his entire managerial pedigree has been built on 3-4-3. You can't be surprised that the guy who has been successful at Sporting in a 3-4-3 comes in and wants to play 3-4-3. I don't think that he's only got one way of playing. He's made a point to us in press conferences before that he never played in 3-4-3 as a player. It was always with a back four. So it's not that he doesn't understand other systems. It's just simply what is tried and tested in his mind. Now, he would also tell you, perhaps not in a news conference, these players failed in a variation of 4-3-3 under Erik ten Hag. So to simply say, you need to change the system and everything will be fine, I think he thinks is a bit daft. I would also suggest that maybe it's a little bit reckless at this stage of the season, after a summer of working in 3-4-3, to then just say, right, we're going to flip and we're going to change and play a back four with a midfield 3, because it's clearly a system that he doesn't trust. The players would then feel it is a little bit confusing. That he's battling relentlessly at the moment to keep the players on side. And any sign of weakness now coming from the manager is going to be jumped upon by the dressing room and make his position at United even more even worse. And you could sense that in the way that he was speaking after the derby against City, that I think everyone could see watching that game that, if you've got questions about the system, that's fair enough. But there was an awful lot of individual and collective defensive errors that contributed to those goals. He could have quite easily come out after that game and pointed fingers and started saying, well, yeah, but look at Luke Shaw for that first goal. Look at Shaw and Ugarte for the second goal. And he didn't. He's trying to keep the players on side as best he can. And I think at this stage, to change his system would be a sign of weakness in the dressing room. And I think that he's trying desperately to keep everyone on side as best he can in a very, very difficult situation. And, ultimately, we can sit here as long as we want and talk about this. He has to start winning games and winning games quickly, and he will accept that. But I just think there's a lot of other things going on, and I don't really think that Amorim should be the lightning rod for criticism that he's become.
Mark, okay, if we can't ask for him to change his starting formation, the thing that he's wedded to, and sort of digging in on it, could we ask for a bit more in-game tweaking, variation, responding to certain game states? Would that be fair?
I think what you could ask for is more from the players. And I agree with Rob that the players that he's got, most of them aren't good enough, but I think a more pragmatic coach would find a way to make them play. Look, on the Erik ten Hag 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1, they weren't very good at that either. So you have a problem there. It's almost like a catch-22. Is it the coaches, is it the players? And I think it's a bit of both. But, tweaking in game, he does try that. He tries to bring different players on for different positions, but it doesn't really work. Now, I was watching the Liverpool Atletico Madrid Champions League game on Wednesday night. Now, this is kind of an unfair comparison, but the point I'm going to make is that when you watch the Liverpool players play, you just know that every single one of those players trusts every one of his teammates to do the job. You know that when the ball goes right, left, through the middle, there's no doubt in the minds of those players that the player with the ball or the player that's making the run can do what is expected of him. On the flip side, at Man United, I don't think any of those players trust each other because they know that they'll either let them down or they have let them down in the past. There's a sense of weakness and nervous and anxiety about those players that they don't trust anybody. If like Bruno Fernandes tries to play like a 10-year-old in the schoolyard because he doesn't trust the players around him, there's certain players that he won't pass to. We've seen that over the years with different players. And I think, when you look around that squad, if you're playing that team, you look at Luke Shaw, who's been there for 11 years. You look at Diogo Dalot, who's been there for 7-8 years. You've got players that are kind of clinging on because they're not good enough. But there's every summer that you would think they would get rid of those players. There's always 2 or 3 different bigger issues to address. So I have sympathy for Ruben Amorim from that perspective that he can't get rid of everybody at once, but they have churned through a lot of players in recent years, Man United. It's not like they kind of just kept a lot of players that they shouldn't have done. They churned loads of players through. But for whatever reason, Ten Hag, Solskjaer before him, Ralph Rangnick for his brief spell, now Amorim isn't getting anything out of those players. But there are coaches out there who, with a bit more, like I said, a bit more pragmatic and a bit more readiness to be flexible, would make that system work. You play to your strengths, or you certainly don't play to your weaknesses. And Amorim right now is playing to his weaknesses. That system isn't working. So if he thinks that 4-3-3 or 4-2-3 is going to be worse, it can't really be worse because United are the worst team in the Premier League over the last 12 months from the 17 teams that are in it. So I don't understand why he's not changing, because if he doesn't change, the situation will remain the same and he'll lose his job.
Okay, Mark, I'll stay with you here then, because you mentioned there almost like a lack of trust between the players, or maybe like a lack of belief in each other's qualities. One of the ways to address this can be to purchase more players during the summer transfer window. We've just been through 3 months of Manchester United trying to do that. They brought in 4 first-team players. What have you made of that overall effort, albeit from an early standpoint?
Well, look, end of last season, it was obvious they needed to address the goal situation up front. They weren't scoring enough goals, and I think clearly early on they addressed that by signing Brian Mbeumo and Matthias Cunha. Benjamin Šeško, yeah, he's come in and he's not looked much of an upgrade, but I think we've got to be patient with him. But my argument would be, did you really need 3 forwards? Maybe you could have signed the 2 forwards and then tried with more attacking ability in the team, get more out of Rasmus Højlund or get more out of Joshua Zirkzee. I think Joshua Zirkzee is a lost cause, to be honest, but I think Rasmus Højlund might have had something more about him. And the money you save on not signing Šeško, you could use to sign a central midfielder, or you could use to sign an experienced goalkeeper like Emi Martinez and a midfielder. So they've addressed one area of the pitch which needed addressing, but watching the game at the weekend against Man City and other games this season, the team that they've got, because they haven't strengthened the midfield, they're not getting the ball to the forwards, so the forwards can't score goals. So they're kind of back where they were last season, where they're toothless. 1 goal from open play all season. They just haven't got the creativity to create opportunities, or they haven't got the ability to control games. So They really should have spent more time looking for a midfielder and a goalkeeper, which would have strengthened the spine, rather than overload in attacking positions, which, yes, they have made them better. And I think Šeško will come good at some point. But the longer it goes on without him scoring or getting a chance, his confidence will drop to the point where Højlund's dropped. Højlund went to Napoli, scored in his first game, different league, different level, we know that. But goal scorers are all that confidence. And right now, United's goal scorers aren't scoring goals, so the confidence is going to be through the floor.
Yeah, fair enough. Rob, Mark has mentioned there, he's used the word toothless, and he's mentioned 1 goal from open play. On ESPN earlier this week, in one of your reports, you suggested that United have seen internally signs of progress from Amorim and his team. So can you just expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, I mean, so United's message privately is that they have seen progress. Now, again, progress isn't real until it turns into points in the table. So I can understand that some fans are going to look at some of these reports and think, well, yeah, but we need to actually see real progress, and I get that. But in terms, if you look at the Premier League sort of stats this season, United are second in the league for expected goals, second for successful crosses into the box, first for total shots. They've hit the post and the woodwork more times than anyone else. Second for duels won, first for touches in the opposition box. Now, I appreciate lots of fans are going to listen to that and go, yeah, but it doesn't mean anything. And I get that. But what United are saying privately is that when they look at the data, of which some of those stats are incorporated into that, they are seeing signs of progress. For them, they saw Ruben Amorim at the end of last season throw away a lot of Premier League games because he knew that he had to focus on Europa League. So you have players like Tyler Fredrickson, Chido Obi, Harry Amas playing Premier League games because Amorim was saving his players for the Europa League. So they're willing to kind of accept that last season was terrible, obviously, but there were reasons for it. This season, they have seen signs of progress in the data. They've lost 2 Premier League games this season so far. They've been against Arsenal in a game that United play quite well in, and also against City. There's no shame, really, in losing against Arsenal and Man City. They've beaten Burnley, albeit with a late penalty, and they've drawn with Fulham in a game that they probably should have got more from. So if you're looking at it from United's standpoint, you are sort of talking about quite a small sample size. They are seeing signs of progress and the team is going in the right direction. They are hopeful that in the next couple of weeks, they've got Chelsea on Saturday, then they've got Brentford away and Sunderland at home, 2 games that they should be winning, that when you get to the October international break, things should be looking an awful lot better. Again, I appreciate that none of that really matters unless United start scoring goals and winning games and earning points. But there are signs there, I think, that United are seeing and some of the fans are seeing that things are moving very, very slowly in the right direction. Now, the bigger question is there going to be enough progress in enough time to prevent United from having to make a change? Because ultimately, as Marcus said, results dictate everything, and you can't wait forever for little signs of progress to turn into something bigger. And Amorim doesn't need me to say that. He knows that full well, that that his fate will be decided by results. But I do think that he deserves the benefit of the doubt, and there is enough there to persist with this for a little bit longer.
Yeah, there's a bit of an irony here in that they've signed 2 of the biggest XG overperformers from last season in Matheus Cunha and Bryan Mbeumo, and this season they are bottom of the table in terms of XG underperformance. They're on a minus 5.3 figure. So there is a suggestion, I think, a fair suggestion, that this will iron itself out over time, but it is a question of a ticking clock, I guess. There's another component to this, Mark. Man United this week announced their 2024-25 financial results, and in an accompanying statement, CEO Omar Barada said, "As we settle into the season, we are working hard to improve the club. On the field, we are pleased with the additions that we have made to our men's and women's first team squads over the summer as we build for the long term." Interesting. So Barada hired Amorim. It was probably his first big move. Is that fair to say? And so would that mean that he's got quite a lot on the line here too?
Absolutely. Let's go back 18 months. Omar Barada came in from Man City as the chief operating officer, big reputation. It was a big coup at the time to get a guy that was very highly rated at Man City. People at City will say that he was pivotal to the signing of Erling Haaland. Not sure if they oversold that a bit. I think Erling Haaland was going to Man City, whatever. But still, Omar Barada came with a reputation. It was an upgrade on what United had in those positions. So when a change of manager came about, when Erik ten Hag left, there was a bit of a split. As we know, Dan Ashworth at the time was more keen to look at a coach like Marco Silva. Graham Potter was mentioned, Thomas Frank. They were overruled, and Dan Ashworth obviously ended up losing his job. Omar Barada was very, very forceful on wanting to get Ruben Amorim. So he drove the deal. Now, as I said earlier, I think Amorim was the hot ticket at the time in European football. Somebody was going to get him, and United were praised for getting him. But my issue with Barada is that when he does his due diligence on Ruben Amorim, there were questions he had to ask. First of all, your system, are you completely wedded to that? What happens if it goes wrong? Now, if he asked those questions, I'd love to know what the answers were. And if he didn't ask the questions, then that's a dereliction of duty, because you can't hire a coach without knowing what his situation is going to be if results go wrong. Now, you're telling me that Omar Barada asked Ruben Amorim about his system, and Amorim said, no, it's this way or the highway. That's how I'm going to play. And Barada said, yeah, no problem. If it doesn't work, fine, stick with it. Don't try anything else. Don't become the most predictable coach in the Premier League. No problem. So, yes, Barada has, questions to answer if it doesn't work out, because he was so fixated on getting Amorim in. So Barada needs Amorim to succeed as well, which is why I think that he will get a bit more time to turn it around, because Omar Barada is invested in his appointment. And if it doesn't go well, it's a mark against him in Jim Ratcliffe's eyes. And we know that Jim Ratcliffe is quite unforgiving with people he thinks that have let him down.
Yeah. Rob, agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they've almost become tied together. What I would say, though, is that I think more questions need to be asked of Jason Wilcox and Christopher Vivell in terms of recruitment. That, you can analyse Amorim and see what he's done and decide whether he should stay or go. Then decide, it's Omar Barada's appointment. If this all goes wrong, then he needs to go too. Well, that's quite simplistic. Ruben Amorim would be in a much better position right now if he had the players that were able to play in his system, and that ultimately falls on Jason Wilcox and Christopher Vivell. And you get this big debate around Amorim, you get a big debate around Barada, and no one's really mentioning the other two. Ultimately, you talk about systems and all that kind of thing. None of it means anything unless the players are good enough. And I just don't think that the players are good enough. I don't think that the summer window was good enough in terms of the quality of the players that were attracted, and also the positions that United chose to strengthen. I don't think that the squad is balanced. I think that they've been left with a load of number 10s, not very many capable central midfielders, and 3 number 2 goalkeepers. And we're expecting Ruben Amorim to work miracles with it. Omar Barada, in terms of that process, is the guy that sorts the budget and tries to squeeze every last penny out of a really tight summer budget. So in his mind, he's probably thought, well, I've done quite well here. I've generated enough financial headroom to get these players in. Omar Barada isn't out there picking the players and saying, I want Benjamin Sesko, or I want Mateus Cunha or Brian Mbeumo. That's left to Jason Wilcox and Christopher Vivell. So ultimately, if you're going to ask questions of Barada, which I'm sure there will be if this all goes wrong for Amorim, and you're going to ask questions about Amorim, you need to ask questions of Sir Jim Ratcliffe, Jason Wilcox, and everyone else, because the whole thing is tied together.
I think, just to add to that, Sam, I think it's important to acknowledge that, because all the names that Rob's mentioned there. So Omar Barada is in his first CEO role at a major club. He wasn't the guy that made the decisions at Man City. Jason Wilcox, prior to being at Man United, was academy director at Man City and then went to Southampton for a year as director of football. So has got nowhere near the experience required to take this job at Man United. Christopher Vivell, yes, he had a decent time with Red Bull, but he lasted 6 months at Chelsea. Jim Ratcliffe, a guy that hasn't got a great track record in football. So there's a lot of inexperience within the club. Even Ruben Amorim, his first Premier League job. Now, you can pinpoint United's failings for many different years. But if you go back over the last 10, 12 years since Alex Ferguson and David Gill left, they've had novices and inexperience at all levels. So Ed Woodward, first job as CEO. Richard Arnold, same again. John Murtough was promoted from within to be the director of football. So, you have to question the people who've run the club in the past. Look at Arsenal this summer. Edu left, he brought in Andrea Berta from Atletico Madrid, a guy who knows the job. People have got a different opinion on him, divides opinion, but still, he knows the job. Now, Man United, the managers and the players have been let down by the quality or inexperience of those above them. And Rob's right, these people don't get mentioned often enough. But if the people in the boardroom and the offices aren't equipped to do the job, you've really got no chance. And that's what United have found over the last 10 years. They've been drifting along because first the Glazers and now Ineos have appointed people that haven't quite got the skill set to do the jobs they've appointed to do.
Complicated, isn't it? Multi-layered, to put it lightly. But I think we'll finish there, guys, and we'll go to the big question. Ruben Amorim, stay or go, quick fire. Mark, I'll come to you first.
Well, I mean, listen, I think he should go, and on the basis that since David Moyes, Man United have left their managers in place for too long. Moyes, Van Gaal, Mourinho, Solskjaer, Ten Hag. We all knew long before they went that they weren't the guys for the job. And I think the situation with Amorim's the same. I don't think he's going to turn it around. I think opposition coaches are too aware of what he does, how to exploit it. Marco Silva said recently that Fulham knew exactly what they're going to do and how to stop it. So the secret's out on Amorim. He's a beatable coach. So United should cut the losses now while they can to hopefully, from their perspective, try and save the season.
Okay. And Rob?
Stay. Obviously not indefinitely, but for now, stay. The record, the Premier League record that he's got, you need to add the context around last season into that. He is taking the first steps, from rock bottom. United said that they couldn't do everything in one summer. He hasn't got the players that he needs, every player that he needs for that 3-4-3 system. You can't really say you've got to change systems and everything will be better because these players failed in 4-3-3 under Erik Ten Hag. There are signs of progress. The earliest opportunity that I'll be looking at Amorim's future is January, the very earliest. In my mind, I'd like to see him given the entire season and then make a judgment in the summer.
Okay, the guys have had their say. It's an even split, and that probably does a good job of revealing how incredibly nuanced and complicated this situation actually is. I think we should end on a Jose Mourinho quote, as all good videos do. We're in a generation where we see coaches trying to do things that just don't work and they die. They say, I died, but at least I died with my idea. And I say to them, my friend, if you died with your ideas, you are stupid. Is he talking about Ruben Amorim? Is he talking about Russell Martin at Rangers? Or is he talking about no one in particular? We may never know, but it is an intriguingly timed gem of a quote from a fellow Portuguese as pressure builds on Amorim ahead of a big clash this weekend against Chelsea.